Have you ever wondered if you are walking the path that God has planned for you? How can you recognize the signs that you are walking according to His will in your life? These are questions many of us have pondered at some point in our spiritual journey. We all want to live with purpose, guided by the wisdom and love of our Creator, but sometimes it's not always easy to know if we're on the right path. Life is full of decisions, challenges, and moments of uncertainty, and it can be hard to tell whether we are truly following God's plan for us. The good news is that God provides us with guidance and signs in our daily lives, and it's possible to discern whether we are walking on the path He has set before us. In this video, I want to explore how we can recognize when we are truly walking in God's will, and how we can stay aligned with His purpose for our lives. The purpose of this video is to help you become more aware of the subtle yet powerful ways in which God is guiding you. You'll learn how to recognize the signs He places in your life and how to listen to your inner guidance to make choices that are in alignment with His will. I believe that once you understand these signs, you'll feel more confident and at peace in knowing that you are on the right path. It's easy to feel lost or confused at times, but God is always there, gently guiding us even when we don't realize it. I'll share some key ways to recognize when you're walking on God's path, including listening to your inner peace, observing signs in your life, and trusting in His timing. By the end of this video, I hope you will feel encouraged and inspired to continue walking in faith, knowing that God's plan for your life is unfolding beautifully even in the most unexpected ways. So if you find this topic helpful, don't forget to like and share this video with your friends who might also benefit from hearing these words of encouragement. Sharing is a great way to spread hope and inspiration, and you never know who might need to hear this today. And remember to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos that aim to inspire and uplift you in your spiritual journey. We are all in this together, and I'm so excited to continue walking with you on this path of faith. One of the most powerful and profound signs that we are walking in God's path is the deep sense of inner peace we feel. Inner peace is more than just a feeling of calmness. It is a spiritual state that comes when we align ourselves with God's will. It is often in moments of quiet reflection or contemplation that we begin to experience this peace, even when the world around us is chaotic or uncertain. When we are following the path that God has set before us, we may feel a sense of tranquility that transcends circumstances and leads us to trust that we are where we are meant to be. Inner peace is a sign that we are connected to God's presence and that His guidance is working through us. It is a deep, reassuring feeling that everything will be okay even when we don't have all the answers or when life feels overwhelming. When we feel peace, we know that we are being led by something greater than ourselves. It's as if God is whispering to our hearts, reassuring us that He is in control and that we are walking according to His plan. This peace often arrives during times of uncertainty, doubt, or even crisis. When we face major life decisions, whether it is about our career, relationships, health, or faith, the world may present us with many options and voices that try to influence our choices. But in those moments when we feel that deep sense of peace in our hearts, it's a sign that we are on the right path, walking in the direction that God intends for us. I remember a time in my life when I was at a crossroads, uncertain of which direction to take. I had two options that both seemed promising, yet I felt torn. I prayed and sought guidance, but it wasn't until I took time to quiet my mind and listen to the stillness within me that I experienced the peace I needed. It wasn't the loud, dramatic answer I'd expected, but rather a quiet, deep sense of reassurance that the decision I was about to make was the right one. That inner peace was like a comforting embrace, and it gave me the confidence to move forward with certainty. The more I listened to my inner peace, the more I realized that it was one of the clearest signs of God's guidance. It wasn't always easy to find, especially in the moments of doubt, but when I took the time to listen, I could feel that sense of calm enveloping me like a gentle nudge toward the right path. It's important to recognize that this peace doesn't always come in the way we expect. It might not come in a burst of excitement or clarity. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a subtle shift in our thoughts or emotions. When you feel peace, even in the midst of great challenges, or uncertainty that could very well be a sign that you are walking in the right direction. In the Bible, we see examples of God providing peace in times of distress. In Philippians 4-7, Paul writes, "And the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This verse reminds us that God's peace is beyond human comprehension. It's not based on external circumstances, but rather it is an inner assurance that God is with us, guiding us every step of the way. This peace doesn't promise that everything will be easy or free of difficulty, but it does promise that we won't have to face those challenges alone. God's peace will guide us even through the storm, and it will be a sign that we are walking in His will. Another story in the Bible that illustrates the power of inner peace comes from the life of Jesus. In Mark 4:39-40, Jesus and His disciples were caught in a violent storm while they were on a boat. The disciples were afraid, but Jesus, calmly sleeping, woke up and calmed the storm, saying, "Peace, be still." The storm immediately ceased and the disciples were amazed. In that moment, Jesus demonstrated that peace is not just a feeling, it is a command that He has authority over. Just as Jesus brought peace to the storm, He can bring peace to the storms in our own lives. When we are walking in God's path, even when the storms of life arise, we can experience that same peace that Jesus offers. It is a peace that calms the heart and reassures us that no matter what, God is in control. This peace serves as a guiding force, helping us stay steady and focused, even when things around us seem to be falling apart. As we navigate our spiritual journey, it is important to recognize that this inner peace is a gift from God. It's not something we can manufacture on our own. It is something that comes from Him when we align ourselves with His will. But how do we cultivate and recognize this peace in our own lives? The first step is to take time for prayer and quiet reflection. In our busy, fast-paced world, it's easy to become distracted and overwhelmed. But when we set aside time to be still, to pray, and to listen, we open ourselves to God's presence and His guidance. Prayer is not just about asking for things. It's about seeking God's will and listening for His voice. It's in these moments of quiet communion with God that we can tune into the inner peace that He offers. Another way to recognize God's guidance through inner peace is by paying attention to the subtle shifts in our thoughts or feelings. Sometimes when we are facing a decision, we may feel a shift in our heart, an uneasiness, or a sense of calm that helps us discern what is the right choice. God may speak to us through those feelings, guiding us gently toward the next step on our journey. It's important to remember that peace is not always the absence of trouble, but the presence of God's assurance in the midst of it. When we are walking in God's path, we may still face trials and difficulties, but we will experience His peace as a constant companion. This peace is a reminder that we are not alone in our struggles. God is with us, guiding us through every step. So I encourage you today to take time for prayer and reflection. Quiet your mind, listen to your heart, and pay attention to the peace that God may be offering you. He may be speaking to you through that inner peace, guiding you toward His will for your life. Trust in His guidance and know that His peace will lead you in the right direction. As you walk on the path that God has set before you, remember that His peace is always available to you, no matter what challenges you may face. It is a sign that you are on the right path, walking in alignment with His will, and that He is guiding you every step of the way. Throughout our lives, God often guides us in subtle yet profound ways. These signs may not always be dramatic or immediately obvious, but when we take the time to observe and reflect on the events, people, and opportunities that come our way, we begin to see God's hand at work. One of the ways God leads us is through unexpected events, encounters with people and opportunities that arise at just the right time. These seemingly small moments, often overlooked, are actually part of God's divine plan for our lives. God is always working behind the scenes, orchestrating events and connections to guide us toward His will, even when we don't realize it at first. At times we may find ourselves in situations that feel random or unplanned, but when we look back, we can see how those events played a crucial role in shaping our lives or leading us to where we are meant to be. This is how God speaks to us through the small signs that connect the dots of our lives in ways we might not fully understand until later. For example, think about how you might meet a new friend who offers advice that seems simple at the time but later turns out to be the key to making an important decision. It could be a colleague who introduces you to someone who changes your perspective, or even a chance conversation that opens the door to an unexpected opportunity. These moments may appear insignificant at first, but they could be God's guidance leading us down the path we are meant to follow. God uses people in our lives to speak to us, offering advice, support, or even a different perspective that aligns with His will. These individuals, whether they are close friends, mentors, or even strangers, may be used by God to help us see things more clearly, make the right decisions, or encourage us in times of doubt. When we notice these connections, we can begin to understand that God is working through others to guide us. Another example of how God guides us through events is when opportunities arise unexpectedly, yet they seem to fit perfectly with our life goals and values. Maybe you've been struggling with a decision for some time, praying for guidance, and suddenly out of nowhere an opportunity presents itself that seems to be the perfect solution. It could be a job offer that aligns perfectly with your passions, or a new project that brings your talents to the forefront. These types of unexpected opportunities are often signs from God that He is opening a door for you to walk through. When we begin to see these opportunities as more than just coincidences, we realize that they are part of God's plan. In our fast-paced world, it can be easy to overlook these small signs. We are often so focused on the big picture or the next big thing that we fail to recognize the smaller, quieter ways God is speaking to us. However, it's in the seemingly random and unexpected events of life that we can see God's fingerprints all over our experiences. It's important to slow down and pay attention to the connections between events, people, and opportunities that arise, because these are the moments where God's guidance can be most clearly seen. So how do we recognize these signs in our own lives? The first step is to be aware and present in the moment. Too often we rush through life without taking the time to reflect on what is happening around us. To recognize God's guidance, we need to cultivate a mindset of awareness and openness. This means being willing to pause and reflect on the events of our day, the people we meet, and the opportunities that arise. When we take the time to reflect, we can begin to notice the subtle connections between these events. Another key aspect of recognizing God's signs is learning to trust our intuition and feelings. When something feels right, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment, it could be a sign that God is leading us in a certain direction. This sense of alignment with our purpose can be a powerful indicator that we are walking the path God has set for us. Trusting in these moments of intuition is not about relying solely on our own judgment, but rather about listening to the still small voice of God that speaks to us through our inner feelings and impressions. It's also important to look for patterns and connections between events over time. Sometimes the signs may not be immediately clear, but when we look back on the events of our lives, we may see how they are connected in ways we hadn't realized before. God works in patterns, and often the events that seem unrelated at first are actually pieces of a larger puzzle that God is putting together. For instance, you might have experienced a series of events that seemed random at the time, but when you look back, you realize that each one was a stepping stone leading you to a specific point in your life. Recognizing these patterns helps us see God's guidance more clearly and understand that He is always working in our lives even when we don't fully comprehend His plan. One powerful example of God's guidance through unexpected events can be found in the Bible in the story of Joseph. Joseph's life was filled with ups and downs, and much of his journey seemed uncertain and full of hardship. He was sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused of a crime and imprisoned. Yet despite these difficult circumstances, Joseph remained faithful to God. In the end, God used these seemingly random and unfortunate events to position Joseph exactly where He needed him. Joseph rose to a place of power in Egypt where he was able to save many lives during a time of famine. including the lives of his own family. Joseph's story shows us how God can take the most difficult, unexpected situations and use them for his greater purpose. What appeared to be random or even unfair was actually part of God's plan all along. Joseph himself recognized God's hand in his life when he said to his brothers in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This verse serves as a powerful reminder that even in the most challenging and confusing moments of life, God is working behind the scenes to bring about his greater purpose. Just as God guided Joseph through difficult circumstances, he also guides us through the unexpected events and opportunities that come our way. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but when we look back and see how everything connects, we can trust that God was with us all along. In our own lives, we can look for the small signs that God is guiding us, whether it's through a conversation with a friend, an unexpected opportunity, or a change in direction that feels right. When we recognize these signs, we can be confident that God is leading us just as he led Joseph. It's important to remember that God's guidance is not always immediate or obvious. Sometimes the signs are subtle and take time to become clear. But when we pay attention, trust in God's timing, and reflect on the events and connections in our lives, we begin to see that he is always guiding us toward his will. So the next time you encounter an unexpected event, meet someone new, or find an opportunity that seems to align perfectly with your purpose, take a moment to pause and reflect. It could be a sign that God is guiding you just as he has guided so many others before you. Trust in his plan and know that he is always at work in your life, even in the smallest of moments. Trusting in God's plan can be one of the most challenging yet rewarding aspects of our faith journey. While we often desire immediate answers or quick resolutions, God's path is not always easy or clear right away. Life can be filled with uncertainty, challenges, and seasons of waiting. And during these times, it's crucial that we cultivate patience and trust in God's timing. God's plan for us is not always immediately evident, and we may find ourselves questioning why certain things happen, or why we have to wait for answers. However, it's in these moments of waiting and uncertainty that God is shaping us, preparing us for what's to come. Patience is key because through waiting we learn to trust God more deeply. It's easy to trust when things are going well, but true faith is developed when we have to wait for God's plan to unfold in his time. One of the most powerful examples of patience in the Bible is the story of Abraham. God made a promise to Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, but this promise came at a time when Abraham and his wife Sarah were both well advanced in age and had no children. God promised Abraham that he would have a son, but the fulfillment of that promise took years. In fact, Abraham had to wait 25 years for the birth of his son Isaac. During those years, Abraham faced numerous challenges and doubts, yet he continued to trust God. He made mistakes along the way, trying to fulfill God's promise through his own efforts at one point, but ultimately God's timing prevailed. The birth of Isaac many years after God's initial promise was a miraculous fulfillment of God's word, and it set the stage for the birth of a nation. Abraham's patience and faith in God's promise resulted in a legacy that continues to impact the world today. This story reminds us that God's path is not always immediate, but when we trust him and wait for his timing, the results are often greater than we could have imagined. Another example of patience is the story of Joseph, as we discussed earlier. Joseph had to endure years of hardship, betrayal, and imprisonment before seeing the fulfillment of God's plan for his life. Despite the setbacks, Joseph remained faithful and patient. He trusted that God had a purpose for him, even when things didn't make sense in the moment. And in the end, God used Joseph's experiences to bring about his greater plan for the nation of Israel. Joseph's story reminds us that patience is not just about waiting. It's about trusting that God is at work in our lives even when we don't understand the process. Trusting in God's timing is also an essential part of recognizing his path for our lives. We often want things to happen according to our own timelines, but God's timing is perfect even when it doesn't align with our expectations. In Isaiah 55, 8-9, God reminds us that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We may not always understand why things are happening the way they are, but we can trust that God knows what He is doing. Sometimes God allows us to go through challenges or delays because He is using those moments to refine us, to teach us patience, or to prepare us for something greater ahead. Our growth often comes through the challenges we face, and God uses those experiences to shape our character and our faith. He might not reveal the next step until we are ready for it, and that's okay. Trusting in God's timing means knowing that He is in control and He will guide us when the time is right. There's a story in the Bible that perfectly illustrates the importance of waiting for God's timing, and that is the story of King David. David was anointed to be king of Israel as a young man, but he had to wait many years before he actually took the throne. During that time, he faced numerous challenges, including being pursued by King Saul, who wanted to kill him. David had multiple opportunities to take matters into his own hands and seize the throne by force, but he chose to wait on God's timing. He trusted that God had a plan even when it seemed like his situation was hopeless. David's patience and trust in God's plan then ultimately led to him becoming one of the greatest kings in Israel's history. God's timing was perfect, and David's faithfulness in waiting for it made all the difference. Trusting in God's timing means having confidence that He knows what is best for us even when we don't see the bigger picture. It's about surrendering our desire for control and trusting that God will open the right doors at the right time. Sometimes the hardest part of the journey is not just waiting, but trusting that God will show us the next step when we need it. This is where prayer and surrender come in. Prayer is a vital part of building patience and trust in God's plan. Through prayer, we communicate with God, seek His guidance, and express our desires and concerns. It's also a way to surrender our plans to Him, acknowledging that He knows what is best for us. In Matthew 6:10, Jesus teaches us to pray, "Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." This prayer is a reminder that God's will is what should guide our lives, not our own desires or agendas. When we surrender our plans to God, we acknowledge that He is in control and that we trust Him to lead us in the right direction. Prayer also helps us to stay connected to God during times of waiting. It's easy to become discouraged or impatient when we feel like nothing is happening, but prayer gives us the strength to persevere. It reminds us that God is always with us, even in the silence. It's in those moments of stillness that we can hear God's voice more clearly, and we can trust that He is guiding us even when we don't see immediate results. Sometimes God asks us to wait because He's preparing us for something greater. He may be building our character, strengthening our faith, or teaching us lessons that will help us in the future. During these waiting periods, it's important to stay faithful, stay in prayer, and trust that God is working behind the scenes. As we surrender our plans and desires to Him, we allow Him to lead us in the way that is best for us. Trusting in God's plan and timing doesn't mean we will never face difficulties or delays, but it means that we can have peace in knowing that God is always working for our good. It means that even when we don't understand the process, we can trust that God's plan is perfect. Patience and trust are essential elements of walking in God's path. Through waiting, we learn to rely on Him more fully, and as we trust in His timing, we find peace and assurance that He is in control. So let us commit to prayer, to surrendering our plans to God, and to trusting in His perfect timing. When we do this, we will find ourselves walking the path He has set for us, with the confidence that He is guiding us every step of the way. As we come to the end of this video, let's take a moment to recap the key points we've discussed and reflect on the important signs that help us recognize when we are walking on God's path. First, we explored the significance of listening to and feeling the inner guidance that God provides. When we experience inner peace, especially in times of uncertainty, it serves as a powerful sign that we are aligned with His will. God often speaks to us in the quiet moments of reflection through that calm and reassurance in our hearts. It is in these moments that we are reminded of His presence and guidance, even when the world around us is chaotic. The second sign we discussed was observing the signs and connections in our lives. God frequently leads us through unexpected events, people, and opportunities that come our way. These moments may seem random at first, but when we pay attention, we begin to notice how they connect with our purpose. Whether it's a conversation with a new friend that offers valuable advice, or an unexpected opportunity that fits perfectly with our goals, these are often signs that God is guiding us toward His will. The third sign is trusting in God's plan and being patient. Patience is essential when it comes to following God's path. We must understand that His timing is not always our timing, and there may be seasons where we must wait for the right moment, just like the examples of Abraham, Joseph, and David. God's plan may take time to unfold, but it's always worth the wait. As we trust in His timing and remain patient, we allow Him to shape us, refine our faith, and prepare us for the great things He has in store. In conclusion, I want to leave you with a word of encouragement. Remember, even when things seem unclear, God is always near and will guide you if you open your heart to receive. Trust that the path you are on, even if it feels uncertain at times, is part of His greater plan for your life. You're not alone in this journey. God is with you every step of the way, leading you toward your purpose. Trust in His guidance, have faith in His timing, and allow yourself to be transformed through the process. If this video has helped you find peace in your spiritual journey, don't forget to like and share it with others so they can also experience God's guidance. Sharing this message could be the encouragement someone else needs to recognize the signs and trust in God's plan for their life. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue to grow and learn together in faith. Let's continue this journey of walking with God, seeking His will, and trusting His path for our lives.